royal box. And you know that in my own country, I cannot sit anywhere that I like in a little measly cinema.
I got involved in the social action because when I returned from college, I realized that there were many things that were wrong with life in Bermuda. Now, I realized that even before I went, that there were things that were wrong, and we needed to make some changes.
I was in a mainly white country, Canada. I mean, I was able to, I faced far less segregation over there in Canada. I was not, I could sit anywhere in a theater. I could go to the best restaurant, and I mean, I didn't face any of the kind of discrimination and that sort of thing that I found in my own home country.
I got involved with the Progressive Group as a result of a meeting with a good friend of mine, Stan Rattray. It was soon after I came home from my studies, and I was preparing to go to work, and he asked me whether or not I would be interested in joining a group which was concerned about social ills. And I told him, I always said yes those days to almost everything. So I told him yes, I wouldn't mind being involved.
The members of that group were all friends. We would meet socially, and obviously we would discuss the condition as we saw it in Bermuda. And the view was taken that we ought to do something about it.
There were always these cells who were talking about doing things, talking incessantly. But when action came about, you got results.
There are no language barriers here, no need to adjust to anything but relaxed and carefree living.
Well, my sister-in-law had come back from Canada, where she had studied at the University of Toronto, and there was no theater, live theater, that we could go to. And since we were people who liked the theater, she was the instigator of a little theater group.
We called it the New Theater Guild. And we rehearsed and did workshops at my brother's studio on Burnaby Street. He had a photographic studio, and at night we used his premises.
While we were having lots of fun doing this, the idea of being able to see the real thing, because some people had not been abroad to see the New York or see the real shows. And we saw in the paper that a real group of well-known actors were coming into Bermuda.
There was an organization called the Bermudiana Theater Club, and this club, they were going to bring in professional actors and actresses. They advertised it in the paper, and we said, oh, great, because you know I was really excited about this. But when we asked how we could buy tickets, they said, well, you can't. Because, well, why not? You have to be a member. Oh, fine, we'll be members. And in the end, they said, well, you have to be of unmixed European descent.
That was a subtle statement that colored people, or those who had African blood, were not welcome. So we decided, now this is a start of something, now this is ridiculous. So we got together at my husband's studio in Hamilton. We made up these placards saying, Ralph Bunche, not admitted to theater. Jews, not admitted.
We dressed ourselves up. I can remember the coat I had on. I wore gloves. I looked great.
I asked for tickets, and they sort of embarrassed. I mean, they weren't used to being confronted face to face, sort of thing. But they had to state that the tickets, it was a private club, limited to only those of European descent. So we said, oh, I guess we'll have to do something about it. So we walked out, and I said, okay. So then we started walking up and down with our placards.
We had to keep moving, and visitors came and wanted to know what this was all about.
We would stand there and talk to them, and they'd say, I'm not going to that theater, that sort of thing. And a policeman came, and he says, what's going on? And we explained to him, and he said, oh. So he went off and stood at the edge of the curb with his back to us, hands clasped behind his back, as if he didn't see a thing.
Of course, there is the story of the president of the Canadian University Women.
I believe her name was Evelyn McLaurin, who was visiting. She was English, and I think she was on her way to Canada. And she was passing by and saw us there. She'd been reading about it in the papers.
She walked up and down with us, trying to find out what this was all about. And she went eventually back to Canada. And she wrote many letters.
Because of the letters to the Colonial Secretary and the publicity in England, in London, the matter was brought up in the House of Parliament.
Letters were written also by Georgine. The governor always went on the opening night, which was for club members only. Eventually, the governor was informed by the powers that be in England that he would have to attend only on public nights. This didn't go down very well. So in the end, they decided to open it up for everybody.
We got together as a progressive group. Actually, we were known as the Johnson Literary Society.
The Johnson Literary Society was not really a society. It was the name that we gave the bank account that we had to be using at the Bank of Auntie Butterfield and Son. And so I don't know whether there's still any money in there or whether they've closed it and destroyed it.
We were looked at by the outside as a social group. We played croquet and other sorts of games.
It appeared to be a social group. In fact, a couple of our friends said they had only joined because they thought this would extend the social life.
But it was a type of society that young people just back from college might want to be a part of, you know? It had no revolutionary connotations, and so that, again, would assist the anonymity, which we felt was important.
We were afraid at that time to do too much at Roslin's because we found out after a while that the police were watching her home. And one Sunday afternoon we were there and we saw the police, detectives actually, coming up in that area. So we went outside and we started playing a game on the lawn.
We realized that In order to do this, we were putting ourselves at risk, not only ourselves, but our parents too, because we knew that in the past, that any young person, upstarts as they call them, came to try to make any changes, they really tried to put the pressure on our parents by calling in a mortgage at just the drop of a hat, like give them a couple of days or something like that to get all the money that they had outstanding in the mortgage. So we wanted this particular group to be anonymous.
And why we were anonymous? Because we took the view that people would probably not pay much attention to us in our suggestions if they knew who we were. Because essentially we were quite ordinary people without any, how shall I say, reputation in Bermuda. And therefore, you've heard the old saying in Bermuda, who do you think you are? And on that basis, a lot of good ideas are rejected.
Late evenings, we used to go into meeting and discuss strategies for making change in Bermuda.
Wilfred Allen, now that does bring back memories. He was an amazing man, an amazing personality. He was logical, he was loud, but he was prolific in his denunciation of the oligarchy. That was the one thing that set him off. And even though he regarded me as being logical, on several occasions he regarded me as being rather naive and indeed illogical. But Wilfred was Wilfred, and I don't mean that in a naive, sentimental kind of way. I'm trying to relate to you what he was, in essence, as a person to me. And not only to me, I suspect to many other Bermudians, because he was a powerhouse. And I tell you something, they had nobody in the oligarchy who could stand up to him. In fact, there was no one in the confines of the black diaspora, that is across all social strata of Bermuda. He stood alone in terms of what he believed. He was diametrically opposed to racial discrimination. He was diametrically opposed to control and manipulation. He was an out-and-out socialist, and he knew his socialism. The man went down deep, 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 deep into the very subsoil of those things that he believed in.
We really saw eye to eye on most things. And of course, the topics that came up was segregation, political empowerment of the people. And we moved right along, and we became very, very close friends, buddies. And I learned so much of Bermuda's struggle through him, and then became associated with it through him.
Eddie and Wilfred became very friendly with a young man named David Critchley.
We became a trio.